Okay, so let's talk about how to paint. So right now you should have already finished drawing your character and the background. If you wanted to go over it with Sharpie, you need to do that before you paint. I don't really want to go over mine with Sharpie, so I left it in pencil. On the back, you should at least have your name and hour. To help you remember what you're doing, you might write down your color schemes and the colors you're planning to use for those schemes so that you don't forget. All right, let's talk supplies. If you're working in class, we're going to be using the paper plate we used in the clay project earlier this year as our paint palette. If you're working from home, try and find a smooth, flat surface that you could mix paint on. So I recommend like a plastic lid from a recycled container. Shiny junk mail will work in a pinch as well. If you're working at school, make sure you put your name and hour on the back of your paper plate. We're going to be putting these on the drying rack at the end of class, and I need to be able to return it to you after they're dry. All right, let's talk water containers. If you're at home, try and find a recycled plastic container to use or a cup that your parents are okay with, just something that can be washed and will hold water really well. If you're at school, we have these water holders. They have holes to hold all of your paintbrushes, either when you've just cleaned them and want to keep track of them so they don't roll on the floor, or if you have to go up and get up and get something mid-project and you don't want to get paint all over your table, again, you just stick them in those holes. It also has these ridges along the bottom section here, and these are really great to help you clean your brush when you're trying to change between colors. So the ridges here just help open up the bristles so that more water can get through and clean them more quickly. We are using little mixing pods. If you are at home, your mixing pods are just in little condiment containers. So the same concepts are going to apply. You want to keep all of these pure. You do not want to mix into these condiment containers or into our nice paint pods here in class. So that is what your paper plate is for. Here in class, we are going to be using a palette knife. Palette knives are really great ways to save your brushes. I don't know if any of you guys have ever painted with a brush that was like full of paint down here by the bristle, and so it doesn't make a point anymore. It just kind of stays flayed out like that. That is not what we want. Those brushes are really hard to clean and come back from that. So to avoid that, we use palette knives for all of our mixing. So let's go ahead and go back. I'm going to start with my monochromatic so that I can show you how to make lighter and darker versions of color. So if you're in class, if you're going to be painting in class, here's like a good example of what not to do. Notice how this green has been mixed with white. It's a lighter version of the green now. These palettes are going to be used by multiple students all day, every day for the course of the painting project. Now we are sanitizing them so that they're clean, but if you are ruining the paints on the inside, you're not just ruining it for yourself, you're ruining it for everybody else who's going to be using these paint palettes. So make sure that you follow these steps to make sure that that doesn't happen. So if I'm making a light green, my colors are going to be white and green. When you're mixing, you always want to start with the lighter color because it is much easier to make a color darker than to bring it back and make it lighter. So I'm going to start with a whole bunch of white. And my sections aren't all that big, right? I'm just going to be painting one section at a time, so I don't need a ton of paint down there. But I am going to try and get all of that paint off. And then I am just kind of wiping it along this edge here. Then you're going to dry it with your paper towel. Cool. And then one thing to be sure of if you're using palette knives at school is that you don't have any paint left on the small edge of your palette knife. That's a really sneaky way that paint can get mixed up, is if you just have a little bit of paint there. If that does happen and you accidentally get a little bit into these paint pods, it's not a big deal. Just clean off your palette knife really well and scoop it back out. That way we're not wasting a ton of paint to clean out the whole thing, but everyone still has a solid amount of clean paint. So I have just a little bit of green on my palette knife, and I'm going to go ahead and mix it in. To make that lighter green. Now, paper plates aren't perfect for mixing because the paper does absorb some of the paint. So you want to work kind of quickly when you So I'm using a round brush. Round brushes are really good for anywhere where you're going to have like a small space that you almost need to like draw in the paint. Flat brushes, like this one, this is a flat brush because it's flat along the top. And these are really good for filling large areas. So the smaller flat ones is what I have, but we're going to be using this round to kind of fill this space in. So one thing to note about this paint, it is tempera paint. And so, first of all, that means it's a little bit washable. So if you make a huge mistake, sometimes you can put water on your paper to try and wash it back out. And of course you want to be really sparing with the water because this is paper and water don't mix super well. You don't want to have a super damp, wrinkled paper for your project. You want it to look nice. The other thing that you should know about this paint is that it tends to be a little bit transparent. So transparent means that you can see through it. So you're seeing kind of some streaks here, and that's because it's transparent. There are two ways to kind of avoid the transparency of these paints kind of messing with your project. I really don't want to see streaks. That's not good craftsmanship. So what you want to do is keep kind of painting right up next to each other until it all blends together. If that's not working, you're just doing that over and over and over again, and there's still streaks just because it's so transparent. Some of these paints are more transparent than others. I think yellow might be the worst about it. But if that keeps happening to you, just know that you can let it dry and then do another layer on top of that. So that's another way that you can build up opacity, which means the opaque quality of the paint. Opaque is just the opposite of transparent, which means that it's not see-through. So there's my lighter. Now that I'm done with this color, I need to rinse off my brush. All right, this next part is for people who are working from home. So if you are not, you can go ahead and skip to 11:50 on this video to kind of see the end of the part that applies to you. Let's talk about how to mix maybe colors now. So if you're at school, you have the full set of values, but if you're at home, the only colors that you have are red, yellow, blue, magenta and cyan, and black and white. Okay, and I've done this because these are your primary colors. Those can be used to mix any color you want. Magenta, cyan, and yellow are also another form of primary colors. They're used by like printers. A lot of inks use these as primary colors, and the reason for that is that these make lighter, brighter colors. So if I wanted to make, let's see, I need to mix a green. So to mix my green, if I have the magenta, cyan, and yellow, I would use the yellow. And again, oh, I did that with my brush. You really want to make sure that if you have the palette knife, use the palette knife. If you're at home, you probably don't have a palette knife, so it's okay to use your brush. Just try and be as clean as you can. So I'm going to use, I've got yellow. Let's see, there we go. And then let's see what it does with the cyan. So just a little bit of cyan, and that's probably not enough yellow. So I'm going to make a separate pile of the cyan and mix the yellow into it. Or mix it into the yellow in smaller quantities, maybe. Okay, this is starting to look really nice. Okay, so with the cyan, we got this like really nice, almost lime green. So I kind of like the way that looks. Again, it's like lighter and brighter. I'll show you what it looks like with the yellow and just regular blue now. So again, you start with your lighter color. You get more of your lighter color. And then you want to get just a little bit of the blue, mix it in. Okay. So it's still kind of a lime green, but it almost looks more like a pea green because it's darker. So if you can kind of see the difference. So this is a lighter, brighter color than this one, even though they were both mixed using yellow and blue. This is the cyan and the magenta are just going to do that. They're going to make naturally brighter colors. If you're looking for more of a dark color scheme, I recommend using the blue and the red. Those darker colors will make better dark colors. So that should be all you need. Oh, one more thing. So if you're working from home, the only other thing that you might need to know is how to make brown. You have black, you have white, you have primaries, and all of those things can get you really any color that you want, but you might not know how to make brown. So brown is what happens when you mix a color with its complement. So you might pick one of the primaries that we have here, like red, yellow, or blue. And then to figure out what its complement is, you just combine the other two primary colors. So like the complement of red is green because green is what happens when you mix yellow with blue. So if you haven't figured it out, one way to make brown is by mixing ratios of all three primary colors. Now it really depends on what your mixture kind of ends up being, but typically a good brown is going to have more red and yellow and less blue. So just kind of mix around until you get a nice brown. When you're finished, your colors should be nice and clean. So here's my example in class. It's a little bit streaky through here and through here. I like this in the hair. I feel like it adds texture to it, and so it's purposeful. In places like this, it's not as purposeful, so I would need to go back through and kind of make those a solid layer, a solid color. But when you're finished, you are going to take a nice picture on a black surface. Make sure you have a nice black border, that it's in focus, well lit, and then you're going to upload that to Canvas so that I can give you a nice grade for it. So have fun painting. If you have any questions, please reach out.